Welcome back to Two Reviews. I'm Jason, and today we have the Tin Hi-Fi T2 Plus. I had to redo this segment so many times because I couldn't get the name right. Alright, so the disclaimer before we start the review, this unit was bought with my own money. I'm not affiliated to any shop or brand, and this review is of my own opinion. And if you want to know more about my preferences and the setup used to do this review, I will leave them in the description below. Okay, so just a small TLDR, and just to actually preface this review, the Tin T2 Plus are probably the most different shaped IEM from the T2 that it could have been. It does not even follow the original turbine shape the T2, the T3 and the T4 actually have, and they sound completely different also. They're hmm, generally more of a V shape. Uh, it's not a very harsh V shape, but it's just completely different. But I think they're quite nice. They're not as technically proficient as other tin IEMs, especially the T2, which is it's supposed to be based off, or at least shares the same name. But yeah, now going to sound. So we'll start with bass. So bass here is sub bass is definitely present. It is quite nice. It doesn't slam hard. I think it slams enough, but it's not really enough to satisfy most bass heads. I find the sub bass to be somewhat lacking. It rolls off at around, I think, 30-40-ish hertz, and mid bass is also it's also emphasized. It's a bit more emphasized than the sub bass, I would say, um, but it doesn't punch hard, which is a bit weird to me. I don't know why that is. But yeah, speed is also not the fastest. It is, I think, for a dynamic driver it's adequate enough. It's not too slow, it's not too fast, and but there is some mid-bass bleed on these, so keep that in mind. So if your playlist mostly consists of something like in the top 40s EDM in general, I think this will do just fine. If you like to listen to metal and such, and you expect to have just more bass but as fast as the original T2s, you'll be a bit disappointed. Okay, now going to the mid-range. So mid-range, because of this emphasis in the bass that is now present in the T2 Plus, mid-range is quite a bit warmer also. It's quite nice actually, but of course the mid-bass bleed that is present sometimes smears over the detail that is there in the mid-range. Uh, and I think male vocals sound quite good in these. Female vocals have a bit of a mix on, so female vocals are definitely present also. They also have quite enough body, but this goes a bit into the treble also. But there's this sort of ringing sometimes present for female vocals, which fatigues me quite easily. I'm not able to exactly point where it is coming from. But yeah, just keep that in mind. If you're sensitive to upper mid or treble, you might want to keep away from these or give it a listen first. Now instruments also sound quite nice. They don't. I think they're quite in a middle ground. Actually, middle to the thinner side of note thickness. They're quite detailed. Not the most resolving IEMs in the world, but I think they do the job well enough. Now, we're going to treble, and treble itself, as I've mentioned previously when I was talking about the mid-range, there's a bit of a ringing somewhere in the, I don't know where it is. I'm not able to pinpoint exactly where it is coming from. And so treble extends quite well. I think it extends quite well over 10k, and I think it just starts falling off, I think somewhere in the 12k region. There's none of the there's not much of a peakiness in the treble as I would expect. It isn't exactly sharp, it's just this ringing that I'm not able to identify where it's coming from, which I don't know about you, but I get fatigued very easily uh, when there's issues in the treble. Usually peakiness and ringing just completely ruins my how long I can listen to an IEM. So if you don't have these issues, if you're not sensitive to treble, by all means, knock yourself out. Now we'll talk a bit more about soundstage and imaging. I did kind of forgot to mention about bass texture and such. So bass texture is it's not it's not the best. Probably why I forgot to mention it. Uh, detail in the bass is also quite well enough. It kind of feels blunted. It's yeah. You can see a bit of a trend here. It's like the T2 Plus are quite good, but they're not that good, which I still have mixed feelings about these. Yeah. But anyway, now going back to soundstage and imaging. So soundstage is, if this were the size of my head, the T2 Plus I think are a bit smaller. They're still inside my head. I think this is mostly because of the warmer tonality. The original T2 didn't really have the biggest soundstage in the world, and these are just a bit smaller. And imaging, I think I am able to pinpoint about a 30-40-ish degree accuracy. I think they do the job well enough. Now, now talking about build quality. So build quality, so the shells on these are absolutely different from the original T2s. So if you didn't like the original T2s, how they fit in your ears, these might fit better. So these are like what I hoped the Blonde's shell should have been like. So the shells have a bit of a, they have this, what's it called? They have a bit of a longer nozzle, and on the nozzle itself they have these ridges. The filter on these are not removable, just FYI, and they seem to be very fine mesh filter. I At first glance I actually thought that these were solid and that I got a, what's it called? I got a defective unit, but turns out they're not. I haven't heard of much of issues with earwax buildup. So the last time we saw something that had this fine of a mesh, we had issues like in the Moondrop spaceship and the Moondrop starfields. But I don't think I've read much about issues with the T2 Plus. Okay, now one other thing to note is that there are fans on the bottom side of the shell and the inside of the shell. So if these sit on your ears and they cover up the fans, you might experience more bass than was expected. Just keep that in mind. And also, I forgot to say this, because of the new shell shape design and base of the cable being bent from the factory, yeah, you cannot use these straight down. I've tried switching it with some other MMCX cables that I have that don't have this bend, but I'm still not able to wear these straight down. So if it was a selling point for you in the T2s, you might not want to get these. For me, it's not an issue because I actually prefer over-ear IEMs, and I think these fit nicely. But for some people, the T2's straight down wearability was a selling point, which is not really present here. Accessories wise, there isn't many accessories, if at all. I actually There's actually 6 pairs of ear tips here. You don't get any sort of case or anything like that, but you also get a pair of these nice foam ear tips. So these are OEM Chinese foam ear tips. So I've experienced with the thin foam ear tips, and I think they're the next best thing after complies. They rebound very slowly, but they're a bit large. So these I think are between M and L sort of size. So yeah, I don't have much other things to say about the build quality. Now we'll just talk about uh, a bit of a comparison with the original T2s. I have no idea what they're still called the T2s, but there has been a bit of a rumor going on in some certain German forums saying that the original T2s, there's now a new batch, and that they are shaped more on the sort of like more of a V shape compared to the original T2, which lacked in base. So I think Tin is just revising their lineup now to just be more of a V shape sort of sound. Uh, now, but I still don't understand why they had to name this the T2 Plus. Like, uh, they don't even look the same. I always thought that the T meant for was meant for the shape of the shell, which looked like a turbine or something like that. But I don't think that's the case. But anyway, against the original T2s, I think these are actually less technically proficient. There's a bit more texture present in the base for in the T2 Plus, but it's mainly uh, because of the more emphasis in the base. But I think these are actually a bit less detailed than the T2. That might be because of the frequency response difference. The T2 sound slightly leaner. They're not as V-shaped, if at all, compared to the T2 Plus. The T2s had a bigger soundstage, more perceived detail because of that frequency response, uh, and yeah, and they were faster also. So if you wanted to listen to metal, wanted to listen to Dragon Force, and you only had few bucks, the T2s were my go-to recommendation. So yeah, if you're looking for a warmer sound, V-shaped sound, I can't really say that these are a warmer T2s. If anything, these sound more like a less bassier, more treble blonde to me. If anything, I don't think these resemble the original T2s in any way, except that they share the name. So yeah, just conclusion. These are essentially, they're not the most resolving IEMs in the price range, even below it. They're not the most technically proficient, but I think they sound nice. Especially if you don't mind the treble ringing that is present. So yeah. Now, if you want to know what Brian thinks about the T2 pluses, it should show up in the screen right about now, and comment what you think. Like if you like the video, subscribe if you want more content like this, and see you guys next time.